The Aurelian Empire did not merely span stars. It consumed constellations. It was a dominion of dragon shifters, beings of scale and plasma, who wore humanoid forms as a matter of convenience, ruling a swath of the galaxy with an ancient, heavy hand. Earth, by contrast, was a footnote. After a brief, brutal conflict that had lasted less than a week, humanity had been granted the title of signatory ally. It was a polite word for a vassal. On the capital planet, Aurea, humanity was permitted an embassy. Aurea itself was a miracle of bioengineering and controlled gravity, a world of living crystal spires that sang in the solar winds and metallic forests that shifted with the seasons. Here, in the heart of dragon power, the human delegation was regarded with a specific, curated amusement. They were the clever pets, the useful curiosities, a species bright enough to invent intriguing toys, but too weak to ever be considered an equal. Adrian Cole endured this distinction with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. His official title was Cultural Liaison for the Terran Diplomatic Corps. His unofficial job, as he defined it, was to be the Empire's favorite pet. He was the witty, sarcastic human who knew how to diffuse tension, who always had a self-deprecating joke, and who looked just harmless enough to be invited to the important functions. His superiors saw him as lazy, but effective. The dragons saw him as charmingly non-threatening. This carefully crafted exterior was a lie. Beneath the lazy smile was a veteran of the 5-Day War. He was the sole survivor of his unit, a man who woke most nights to the memory of plasma fire melting the armor of his comrades. His deeper, colder motive was fueled by the death of his older sister, Clara. She had been an idealist, a true believer in peace, murdered during a pacification action that the dragons had labeled a regrettable necessity. Adrian knew it was a massacre, orchestrated to shatter Earth's morale. His grief had hardened into a single, secret purpose to find a way to make the system that had crushed his family pay. But he walked a razor's edge. Revenge could not come at the cost of a second war. He could not, would not, allow Earth to be erased. His burden had recently doubled. Clinging to his hand was his nephew, Leo Cole. Leo was 6 years old, with his mother's wide, curious eyes and the silence that had settled upon him 2 months prior. Leo's mother, Adrian's younger sister, Elena, had been a diplomat. She had died in deep space, her ship suffering a catastrophic systems failure. Another accident, another lie. Now, Adrian was all Leo had left. His mission to protect humanity had become inextricably tangled with his need to protect this one small boy. The occasion for their presence was a grand ceremony in the Ethelgard, the grand throne room of the Dragon King. The hall was a cavern of impossible scale, its walls not built but grown from living crystal and sentient metal, pulsing with a faint, internal light. The human delegation, clad in their dark, formal suits, looked like a patch of moss on a mountainside of diamond. They were here, along with hundreds of dragon nobility, in their precise, elegant humanoid forms, for the reaffirmation of protection. It was the honor bestowed upon Earth. From his position near the back, Adrian watched the key players. High Chancellor Malik stood near the throne, a monolith of contained power. In his humanoid guise, he was tall, severe, his features carved from granite. He was the head of Imperial Security, the voice of dragon supremacy, the one who believed all other species were mere tools. He was the man who had, Adrian knew with chilling certainty, given the order that killed Clara. On the other side, observing the delegation with an unsettling intelligence, was Princess Ceres Aurelian. She was the king's daughter, a brilliant scientist who served, ironically, as the official patron for the Terran mission. She wore her humanoid form with a restless grace, her sharp features dominated by eyes of liquid gold. Ceres was an anomaly. She possessed the cutting sarcasm of her kind, yet beneath it lay a genuine, almost academic, curiosity about humanity. Adrian sensed her conflict, a mind trapped between loyalty to an empire she knew was flawed and a disdain for the dogma of supremacy. The king, a being of immense age and presence, began to speak. His voice did not sound so much as a resonance that vibrated in their bones, echoing through the living crystal. He spoke of the empire's benevolent guidance, of the peace guaranteed by their strength, of the equal partnership with Earth. Adrian's smile remained fixed. Guidance. He translated internally. Domination. Peace. Submission. Partnership. Ownership. He swallowed the acidic bile of his hatred. He thought of Clara, of her passionate belief that these beings could be reasoned with, that they could build a bridge. She had been a diplomat. He had been a soldier. Now she was scattered atoms. And he was the one left playing the diplomat, forced to stand and nod as her murderer watched. He would make them pay, not with ships, not with guns. He would find a crack in this mountain, and he would plant a seed of chaos that would tear it apart from within. The ceremony was long. The air was thick with incense and the hum of latent power. It had been nearly 2 hours. Leo, standing beside him, was vibrating with the contained energy of a 6-year-old boy, pushed far beyond his limits of patience. He looked up at Adrian, his face a silent plea. Adrian gave his hand a gentle squeeze, his focus momentarily fractured, lost in the dark calculus of his revenge. It was all the opening Leo needed, with the deftness of a small creature. Leo slipped his hand free. Adrian, lost in his thoughts of Malik, was a half-second too slow. Leo wasn't being malicious. He was just bored. He darted away from the delegation. So small, he was almost invisible against the massive scale of the hall. He navigated the shadows behind the towering crystal struts, drawn toward the single most impressive object in the room, the wall behind the throne. To the human eye, it was a flawless, curved expanse of what looked like golden obsidian, polished to a perfect mirror, reflecting the light of the entire chamber. It was vast, silent, and ancient. Leo ducked into the alcove directly behind the throne itself. He was hidden from the assembly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his most prized possession, a Terran-made nano-ink stylus, a gift from his mother. He looked at the vast, empty canvas of the wall, and he began to draw. He drew what any 6-year-old would, a lopsided house, a stick figure with a smile, which he decided was Uncle Aid. He drew another stick figure next to it, and with a small, sad noise, he added a pair of wings. To the humans, it was nothing. A faint flicker, perhaps, on the wall's surface. To the dragons, it was the sky tearing open. The instant the nano-ink touched the obsidian, the wall screamed. It was a soundless explosion of light. The reflective golden surface dissolved, replaced by a blinding, incandescent matrix. Leo's scribbles were not scribbles. They were activators. They were keys. Across the entire expanse, ancient dragon runes, the true long script. The language of creation itself blazed to life. They were characters of pure, terrifying energy, configurations that had not been seen on Aurea for 10,000 years. The king's resonant voice stopped, choked off in a sharp, inhaled gasp. The entire hall froze. Hundreds of dragon lords, the most powerful beings in the galaxy, stared in unified, primal shock. The air crackled, saturated with a power that had just been unleashed. Then, the floor pulsed. It was not a tremor. It was a single, deep, resonating heartbeat from the core of the planet itself. Deep beneath the crust, leagues below the living crystal, something that had been sealed, something that had been sleeping, had felt the runes awaken, and it stirred. High Chancellor Malik's shock lasted only a moment. It was replaced by a raw, naked hunger. his eyes fixed on the wall, not with fear, but with avaricious awe. He saw power. He saw a weapon. Adrian's diplomatic facade shattered. The soldier took over. His only thought, the only mission, Leo. He didn't walk. He moved. He vaulted the low crystal barrier separating the delegation, his body low, his movements fluid and economical. He crossed the open space in 3 long strides, ignoring the stunned looks of the dragon nobility. He reached the alcove and snatched Leo, pulling the boy back and spinning, shielding him with his own body as the wall pulsed with another wave of light. "What did you do?" he hissed, his voice a low growl. Leo was crying, his hands over his face, terrified by the blinding light and the planet's groan. "I just drew. Uncle Aid. I just drew Mama." As Adrian held him, the wall flared again, a searing wave of energy washing over them. Adrian cried out, a sharp gasp of pain. It wasn't the light. It was the scar on his chest, the jagged, branching tissue left by that experimental energy weapon in the war's final hours. For one blinding instant, the scar ignited. A circuit of white-hot fire flashed beneath his shirt, a perfect, agonizing mirror of the runes on the wall. It felt like his entire nervous system had been plugged into the sun. Then it was gone. A phantom pain. An illusion. He straightened up, his breath ragged, holding Leo tight. He looked out at the hall. Every single dragon was staring at him, at the human man, and the human child, standing at the epicenter of a miracle or a cataclysm. Malik's gaze was fixed on them, sharp as a drawn blade. Princess Saris was pale, her scientific curiosity completely overwhelmed by a profound, intelligent dread. The ancient runes burned. The planet hummed its deep, resonant note. And in Adrian's arms, a 6-year-old boy held the stylus that had just awakened the soul of the Aurelian Empire. The silence in the grand throne room was a living thing, heavier and more oppressive than the planet's groan. It was broken by a single, sharp command from High Chancellor Malik. "Seal the hall." Armored dragon shifters, the Imperial Guard, moved with terrifying efficiency. Their polished black armor, inlaid with gold, seemed to absorb the light from the still-burning runes. Massive doors of crystal and metal slid shut with the sound of a tomb closing. The human delegation, clustered together near their assigned alcove, suddenly looked very small and very trapped. Malik strode forward, his heavy boots echoing. He did not look at the king, still frozen on his throne. He did not look at the wall. He looked at Adrian and at the child in his arms. "Give me the boy," Malik commanded. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, which made it all the more menacing. Adrian's grip on Leo tightened. He placed himself squarely between the Chancellor and his nephew. "He's a 6-year-old kid who drew on a wall. He's under diplomatic protection. You can't have him." "Diplomatic protection is suspended," Malik stated, as if discussing the weather. "An artifact of primal power has been activated by an alien entity. This is now a matter of imperial security. The child is an anomalous variable. He will be taken for study. He will be taken over my dead body," Adrian snarled. The words were out before his diplomat brain could stop his soldier reflex. He felt the blood drain from the faces of his own delegation behind him. Director Hale looked apoplectic. Malik's lips thinned. He had not expected such visceral resistance from the harmless pet. "That can be arranged. Liaison Cole." He raised a hand, and 2 guards leveled their energy rifles at Adrian. The air crackled with the weapon's charge. "Chancellor." The voice cut through the tension like a diamond blade. Princess Saris stepped forward, placing herself between Malik's guards and Adrian. Her golden eyes were blazing, not with the ethereal light of the runes, but with cold, aristocratic fury. "Are you insane?" Malik, she snapped. "You would execute a diplomatic envoy and seize a child in the middle of the Grand Hall, in front of the entire court. You would provoke a war over a drawing. This is no drawing, princess, Malik countered, his voice dropping. This is the lattice. He has awakened the lattice. The protocols are clear. The protocols are millennia old, and were written under the assumption the activator would not be a terrified human child. Saris retorted. She glanced at Adrian. Then back at Malik. This is a diplomatic and scientific crisis, not a military one. Your heavy hand will shatter us all. And your solution, Malik challenged. Saris took a breath, her mind working rapidly. The boy is a catalyst, not a weapon. He must be studied. Yes, but not in your interrogation cells. He will be placed in my care, in my research wing, here in the palace. Malik's eyes narrowed. Unacceptable. He is a security risk. He will be under your security, Saris countered, gesturing to the guards. And he will be under my scientific observation. And, she added, looking directly at Adrian, he will be attended by his guardian. Liaison Cole will remain with him. Both sides will be present. We will avoid a diplomatic incident, and we will actually learn something, rather than just breaking our new toy. It was a brilliant maneuver. It placated Malik's need for control, Adrian's need for protection, and the king's need to avoid cosmic panic. Malik stared at her for a long, calculating moment. He saw her clearly for the first time, not just a pampered scientist, but a political player. By publicly defying him, she had drawn a line. He hated her for it. But the logic was sound. He gave a stiff, curt nod. As you wish, princess. Your laboratory. Your supervision. He then pinned Adrian with a look of pure malice. But know this, human. If the boy or you deviate by a single millimeter, if you so much as sneeze without permission, I will have you both vivisected. Am I understood, Adrian? His heart, hammering against his ribs from the phantom pain in his scar, nodded slowly. Crystal clear, Chancellor. You have a real gift for diplomacy. The standoff ended. The hall was cleared, the dragon nobility murmuring in stunned whispers. The human delegation herded back to their embassy, under heavy guard. But Adrian and Leo were not taken with them. They were escorted by Saris and a phalanx of Malik's guards to the princess's private wing, a soft, beautiful prison of white crystal and advanced technology. The news ripped through the imperial court and the Terran embassy with the force of a shockwave. Within hours, the dragon scholars and high priests, their robes dusting the ancient floors, had convened. They emerged with a revelation that terrified the Empire to its core. The runes were, as Malik had named it, the Dragon Lattice. It was not a mere historical record. It was the operating system of reality, a complex matrix of creation runes woven by the dragon ancestors to impose order on a chaotic universe. And it had a primary function to serve as the lock on an interdimensional prison. The prisoner's name was Null Ma. The ancient texts described it as a sentient void, an entity of pure entropic hunger that had nearly consumed the galaxy eons ago, born from the chaos of raw, untamed power. The lattice had been built to seal it away, to balance its nothingness with the dragon's existence. And the prophecies, long dismissed as religious fantasy, were suddenly being read as technical manuals. They all contained a chillingly similar line: the lattice would sleep until the end of time, or until it was touched by a new, small hand, from a distant sky. Leo Cole, the 6-year-old boy from Earth, was the fulfillment of that prophecy. For the human delegation, this news was a catastrophe. They were no longer clever pets. They were the species that had just unleashed a potential apocalypse. Director Hale, the head of the Terran mission, convened an emergency meeting in his soundproofed office. He was a man built of cold calculations, a pragmatist who saw survival as the only virtue. They see the boy as a key, Hale said. His fingers steepled. A key that can either relock the cage or, perhaps, open it, or be broken in the lock, Adrian said. He had been allowed to attend via a monitored holographic link from Saris's lab, while Leo slept on a cot in the next room. His safety is a concern. Liaison, Hale said, his tone dismissive. But the larger picture is the survival of our species. Milik sees a weapon. The priests see a demon. But do you know what I see leverage? Adrian felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Leverage. The dragons have a cosmic problem only a human can solve. For the first time since the war, they need us. This rune tech lattice, its power on a scale we never dreamed of. If we play this right, if we offer Leo's cooperation in exchange for access to that technology, offer him. Adrian interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. He's not a chit to be bargained with, Director. He's my nephew. He's a child. He is one child, Hale shot back, his eyes like ice. We are responsible for 8 billion souls back on Earth. If I have to trade one child's life to gain the technology that frees those 8 billion from dragon supremacy, I will make that trade. You are a soldier, Cole. You should understand acceptable losses. I understand them perfectly, Adrian said, which is why I know a traitor when I hear one. He cut the link. He was truly alone. He couldn't trust Milik. He couldn't trust Saris. And now, he couldn't even trust his own people. His mission parameters had just shrunk to a single point: protect Leo. Everyone else was an obstacle or a threat. He walked to the window of the lab. It overlooked a crystalline courtyard where fountains flowed with liquid light. He pressed his hand to his chest, feeling the phantom itch of the scar beneath his shirt. He let his mind drift back, for the first time in years, to that last battle. It was on Cygnus 3, a firestorm. His unit was pinned down. Then the sky had split open, not with dragonfire, but with something new. A weapon Milik was testing, unauthorized, on a human target. It wasn't fire. It was a wave of pure, unmaking energy. It had struck his armor, and he remembered a single moment of impossible, searing agony. When he woke, his unit was gone. Just shadows burned into the rock, and he was alive, with a strange, branching scar that glowed with a faint, crystalline residue for days. The medics had called it a miracle. Now, he wondered, that scar had burned when the lattice awoke. It resonated with the same energy. What had that weapon been? What had Milik done to him? He pushed the thought away. It was a distraction. It didn't matter what he was. It only mattered what he had to do. Leo was the priority. His thoughts were interrupted by the chime of the lab door. Princess Saris entered, holding a small tray with Terran-style juice boxes and nutrient bars. She looked exhausted. He's sleeping, Adrian said, not turning from the window. Good. He's had a significant day. She placed the tray on a table. Your Director Hale is a piece of work. Adrian turned, surprised. You were listening. I am the patron of your embassy, Liaison, and this is my lab. I listen to everything. She crossed her arms, her golden eyes appraising him. He is willing to sacrifice the boy. He calls it an acceptable loss. We call it Kara, Saris said. The culling of the weak for the strength of the whole. It is an ancient and brutal part of our philosophy. I am disturbed to see it mirrored in your director. Adrian gave a short, bitter laugh. Oh, we're full of surprises. You think you're the only species that knows how to be monsters? We've just had less practice on a galactic scale. A flicker of respect passed through her eyes. You are not what I expected. Your file says you are a cynic, a jester. And your file says you are a pampered academic. Yet here you are, defying the High Chancellor and running a shadow war from your lab. A small, dangerous smile touched her lips. Perhaps our files are incomplete. You believe our empire is corrupt, decadent, rotting from the inside. That's the polite version, Adrian agreed. And you are wrong, she said, her voice hardening. The Empire is stable. It is the only thing that has kept this quadrant of the galaxy from descending into barbarism for 20,000 years. It is the only thing strong enough to have built the lattice and contained the Maw. What you see as corruption, I see as the necessary compromises of governance. What you call supremacy, I call responsibility. That's a beautiful speech, Adrian shot back, stepping closer. Did you practice it? That responsibility looked a lot like a massacre when Milik's ships glassed the colony on Delphi Prime. It looked a lot like murder when my sister's ship accidentally exploded. The air between them crackled, as charged as the throne room had been. They were inches apart, two ideologies clashing. And what of your people? Saris countered, her voice low and fierce. Do you think we are blind? We know about the secret shipyards at Titan. We know about the weaponized viruses you were developing before the war. You preach of human innocence, but you were preparing for a genocidal war you knew you could not win. We simply ended it before you could. Adrian stared at her. He saw her loyalty, her intelligence, her pride, and he saw the cracks in it, the doubt she was trying to mask with anger. There was an honesty in their confrontation that he hadn't felt from anyone in years. He found himself, against all reason, drawn to it, drawn to her. So we're just two monsters. Princess, he said quietly, arguing over which one has the better justification. Her gaze softened. Just for a moment. No. Liaison. I don't believe you are a monster. I believe you are a man trapped by his own history. Perhaps, am I? The moment was broken by a small voice. Uncle Aide Leo was sitting up on the cot, rubbing his eyes. I'm hungry. And I need to pee. The tension vanished, replaced by the mundane. Adrian let out a breath and ran a hand through his hair. Right. One cosmic crisis at a time. Bathroom first. Saris watched him go to his nephew, his entire demeanor shifting from predator to protector. She saw the gentleness with which he helped the small boy, trapped by his history, she thought, and driven by it. 2 days passed. The palace was a hive of frantic energy. Malik was consolidating his power, using the fear of the Null Maw to move his security forces into key positions. He had audiences with the Emperor, long, closed-door meetings where Saris knew he was spinning his narrative. He argued that the lattice, now active, was the ultimate weapon. It could reorder reality, create and destroy stars. It was the Empire's divine right. The human child was a regrettable complication, but a necessary tool. The risk of the Null Maw waking was minimal, he assured the court, but the threat of it was the perfect justification to seize control of the lattice. And if the Maw did leak, all the better to blame the humans for the catastrophe and use it as a pretext to absorb Earth fully. To further this, he activated his network. Imperial security began subtle, harassing patrols of the human embassy. The high priests began to preach from the crystal balconies, their voices amplified, speaking of the unclean touch and the lesser species that had defiled their most sacred artifact. And on the human side, Director Hale began his own quiet work. He identified members of the delegation who shared his pragmatic, cold-blooded view. He began feeding Malik's agents small, insignificant pieces of intelligence as a show of good faith, positioning himself as the reasonable human Malik could work with once the dust settled. In the sterile quiet of Saris's lab, they were in the eye of the storm. We need to know what he can do, Saris said. She and Adrian stood before a portable, blank segment of the same golden obsidian material as the throne wall. Leo sat at a small table, happily coloring on a datapad. You want him to draw on it, Adrian said. It was not a question. I need to see the activation. I need data. Malik is arguing for weaponization. I am arguing for containment. Right now, he has all the momentum. I have nothing. I need to know if the boy's touch is a simple on switch, or if it is something more. And if it hurts him, it did not hurt him last time. Saris said. It frightened him. This time, he will be prepared. We will be here. It is the only way. Adrian. He hated it. But he knew she was right. He knelt beside Leo. Hey, buddy. You know how you got in trouble for drawing on the wall in the big room? Leo nodded, his eyes wide, looking at the obsidian panel. Well, Adrian said, pulling out the nano ink stylus. Guess what? They want you to do it again. A slow, delighted, 6-year-old smile spread across Leo's face. For real. For real. Just a small drawing this time. Okay, whatever you want. Leo took the stylus and walked up to the panel. He paused, then drew what he had before a lopsided house. The panel lit up. It was not the blinding explosion of the throne room, but a controlled, intense pulse. Runes, ancient and complex, flared across its surface. Saris's sensors whirred, capturing terabytes of data. But the runes didn't just glow. They moved. On the lab's main holographic display, a new image appeared, generated by Saris's deep core scanners. It was a 3-dimensional map of Aurea. And on that map, lines of energy were appearing, mirroring the runes on the panel. The lines converged on the planet's core. Then, red lights began to blink on the map. What is that? Adrian asked, his hand instinctively going to Leo's shoulder. Those are leaks, Saris whispered, her face pale. The throne room activation was a shock to the system. It woke the lattice. This is a diagnostic. The boy's drawing is querying the lattice, and it's showing us where the seal is weakest. The map expanded, showing the local star system. More red lights appeared, hanging in the blackness of space. It's not just the planet, Saris breathed, horrified. The prison is failing. The seals are degrading. Oh, Ancestor Malik thinks he can control this. He has no idea. He's not trying to tame a weapon. He's poking a god. The runes on the panel faded. The map, however, remained, the red lights blinking like a dozen silent warnings. The Null Maw was waking up. That night, Adrian could not sleep. The image of those blinking red lights was burned into his mind. The cold, political maneuvering had become something terrifyingly real. He walked quietly into the small alcove where Leo slept. The boy was curled on his side, his breathing deep and even, the nano-stylus clutched in his hand like a teddy bear. He looked so small, so impossibly fragile. This small boy held the fate of the galaxy in his sleeping fist. Hale wanted to sell him. Malik wanted to dissect him. Saris wanted to use him to save her people. And Adrian. He felt the cold, hard certainty of his original promise to return. But it was no longer an abstract thirst for vengeance against an empire. It was specific. It was personal. It was focused entirely on the small, breathing child in front of him. He thought of Clara. He thought of Elena. He thought of the billions of lives on Earth and the trillions in the Empire. He thought of the coming storm and the waking void. And he made a new vow. They could have the Empire. They could have the lattice. They could have his life. But if this world, if any of them, laid a hand on this boy, he would not just find a crack in the mountain. He would pull the sky down, and he would bring the entire, glittering, crystal palace crashing into ruin. He would become the monster they thought he was, and he would burn them all to the ground. The holographic map, with its blinking red ulcers, had become the room's unwanted centerpiece. Leo was asleep, exhausted by the repeated controlled tests Saris had run, each one confirming the same terrifying diagnostic: the lattice was failing. He's not just poking a god. Adrian, Saris said, her voice low. They were alone. the lab sealed against any surveillance Malik might attempt. He's trying to steal its fire, and he doesn't even see that the god is just the cage. She gestured, and the map was replaced by a new set of data. It was not a scan, it was text. Ancient, complex, draconic script that writhed on the screen. This is from the Imperial Sista, the Forbidden Archive. What the priests preach from is a simplification. This is the source code. And Adrian leaned in, his fatigue forgotten. The dragon lattice is not a religious artifact, she explained, her golden eyes intense. It is the single greatest act of engineering in galactic history. My ancestors didn't just find the laws of physics. Adrian. They wrote them. This is the language of reality. They used it to stabilize wormholes, to ignite suns, and to build this world. All-powerful. Got it. So what's the null maw? A bug, she said simply. A consequence. The texts call it the shadow of ambition. It was born from the chaos of their own unrestrained power. A sentient black hole that feeds on desire and hatred. It's not an external enemy. It is our collective sin, our creation. And to stop it, my ancestors had to create the lattice to lock it away. They programmed reality to have a prison. The problem is, all prisons decay. She magnified a section of the text, a specific prophecy. It was the one he had heard, a new, small hand, from a distant sky. Look, she pointed to a footnote. One so old the script was barely legible. This is a later addendum, added by the first empress after the lattice was sealed. The priests never read this part. They find it distasteful. Adrian read the translation she provided. The catalyst is not the hand alone. It is the unforeseen equation. It is the blood of the alien, mixed with the seed of the dragon line. A heavy, electric silence filled the lab. Saris's gaze drifted from the text to Leo sleeping on the cot, and then, with a new, unwelcome intensity, to Adrian. Adrian felt it too, a cold prickle on his skin. Alien blood. That was him. That was Leo. Mixed with, he instinctively touched his chest, where the scar itched. He was the soldier who had survived the unsurvivable. He was the one whose scar had burned in the throne room. Leo, the small hand, had turned the key. But was Adrian the lock? Neither of them spoke the thought aloud. It was too vast, too dangerous. If Malik even suspected, he's a child, Adrian said, his voice rough, forcing the conversation back to the immediate threat. That's all he is. Yes, Saris agreed, too quickly. He is. But Malik doesn't care about prophecies. He cares about power. And right now, he is winning the narrative. She was right. The propaganda machine had been running at full power for 3 days. Malik's voice was everywhere. He didn't appear himself, but his surrogates did. Stern-faced high priests, their scales glittering like obsidian, addressed the populace from crystal balconies, their voices magically amplified to carry over the city. They spoke of the sacrifice of the human pet. They claimed the throne room, the heart of the empire, had been defiled by an unclean, lesser species. They twisted the truth, claiming Leo's attack had purposefully weakened the lattice, inviting the Null Maw's return. Fear was the most effective political tool in the galaxy, and Malik was a master of it. The sentiment spread. The guards outside the human embassy were no longer just a protective detail. They were a hostile perimeter. Dragon citizens, usually indifferent, now hurled insults at embassy staff. Trade delegations were canceled. The air of amused curiosity had been replaced by a simmering, righteous anger. Malik was giving them a target for their ancient fears, and that target was Earth. Adrian felt the net tightening. He had one small, illegal advantage, a quantum-entangled comlink, military grade, which he had used to create a secret back channel into the embassy's secure network. He was supposed to be the harmless cultural liaison, but he had never stopped being a soldier, never stopped gathering intelligence. He was listening in, his earbud hidden by his hair, as Director Hale convened another secret meeting. This time, Hale wasn't in the embassy. He was in a neutral, high-security lounge, and he was not alone. A mutually beneficial arrangement, Chancellor. Hale's voice was smooth, obsequious. Adrian's blood ran cold. Chancellor. Hale was meeting Malik. Your definition of mutual is limited, Director. Malik's deep, resonant voice replied. Even through the comlink, it sounded like stones grinding together. You offer me the key, a key I already possess. You possess the child's body, Chancellor, Hale countered, but you do not possess his cooperation, or his uncle's. They are problematic, stubborn. I, on the other hand, can guarantee that cooperation. I can convince Adrian Cole that it is for the good of humanity. I can order him to stand down. And your price for this cooperation? Autonomy. True autonomy for Earth. Not this vassal state status. And, of course, access. We want the knowledge of the lattice. We are a clever species. As you know, we can help you unlock its secrets. We can be your partners, not your pets. You would sell the child, Malik stated. I would invest the child, Hale corrected. For the future of my species. He is the key. Let us use him together. We can stabilize the lattice, learn its power, and you will have the eternal gratitude of a newly empowered Earth. And I will have delivered it to them. Adrian ripped the earbud out, his hand shaking with a white-hot, silent rage. This was not just a cold calculation. This was treason. Hale was bartering Leo's life, his soul, for a chance to sit at the table with their oppressors. His desire for revenge, once a cold, hard diamond focused on Malik, suddenly fractured. It now had a new, equally deserving target. He wasn't just fighting a hostile empire. He was fighting the rot within his own species, the very corruption of humanity he had been trying to protect. Saris saw the look on his face. What is it? What did you hear, Hale? Adrian spat. He's in bed with Malik. He's offering to hand-deliver Leo in exchange for rune tech. Saris closed her eyes, letting out a long, slow breath. Then it's over. The Emperor listens to Malik. Your own director is supporting him. They will issue an imperial decree. They will take Leo, and I will be powerless to stop them. No, Adrian said. Not while I'm breathing. Your breathing is not a relevant tactical consideration, she snapped, her own fear making her sharp. We are out of moves. Malik has us cornered. Then we stop playing on his board, Adrian said, his mind racing. You said that text was from a forbidden archive. You said the priest's version is a simplification. What about the wall in the throne room? Is that the original? No, Saris said, shaking her head. That is just a terminal, a readout. It's a display, nothing more. Then where is the original? Where is the lattice itself? Saris looked at him, her golden eyes wide with a new, terrifying idea. You don't know what you're asking. Try me. There is one place, she whispered. The sunken archive. It is not a room with books. It is a part of the planet's core, directly beneath the throne. It is where the first empress carved the prime runes. It is the central processor, the heart of the lattice itself. It is the most sacred, most dangerous place in the empire. Who can go there? Only the emperor, and the high priest, and even then, only on the day of ascension, once every century. To go there unbidden, it is the highest form of heresy. It is a death sentence. It would be seen as an attempt to seize control of reality itself. It's also the one place Malik won't expect us to be, Adrian pressed, his voice urgent. He thinks he has us pinned in this lab. He's wrong. You said the lattice is a program. Hale and Malik are trying to hack it from the outside. We need to get to the server room. We need to see the source code for ourselves. And what then? Saris challenged. We don't know what we'll find. We could make things worse. We could destabilize the seals completely. What's worse than letting Malik turn the maw into a weapon? Or letting Hale sell my nephew you're a scientist? Saris, you need data. That's where the data is. He saw the war in her eyes. Her loyalty to the Empire versus her scientific conscience. Her fear of Malik versus her growing distrust of his motives. Her entire life, she had been a princess, bound by protocol and tradition. He was asking her to burn it all down. If we are caught, she said, her voice barely audible. My father cannot save me. My name will not protect us. We will be erased. We're already being erased, Adrian countered. At least this way. We go down fighting. She held his gaze for a long time. Then, she gave a single, sharp nod. Get the boy. We are going now. The descent was not a journey of elevators and stairs. The series led them to a hidden maintenance conduit, a shaft of living crystal that plunged deep into the palace's foundations. The air grew warm, humid, and thrummed with a low, subsonic vibration that Adrian felt in his teeth. The palace is alive, Saris explained, as they rode a small work platform down into the glowing dark. It's all connected to the lattice. We are descending into its primary root system. Leo was quiet, clutching Adrian's hand. He was too scared to be bored. After what felt like an hour, the platform stopped. They were in a cavern, but it was not natural. It was a vast, spherical chamber, where the crystal walls pulsed with a soft, golden light. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and something ancient, like dust and forgotten time. This is the antechamber, Saris whispered. The archive itself is through that gate. But it is protected, not just by technology. The gate was a simple archway, but the air within it shimmered, like a heat haze. It is a sieve, Saris said, a psycho-reactive field. The ancient texts call it the trial of weight. It measures intent, guilt, the burden on one's soul. It's designed to keep those with malicious hearts from reaching the core. Great, Adrian muttered, glancing at Leo. What's it to a 6-year-old? I don't know. It may not even see him. But for us, we will be tested. We will face ourselves. Do not believe what you see. It is just an illusion. Just the lattice dredging up your worst memories to frighten you away. Just my worst memories. Fantastic. Adrian knelt. Leo, buddy, we're going to walk through that shiny door. You might see some weird stuff, like a scary movie. It's not real. Okay, just hold my hand. Hold it tight and don't let go. Leo nodded, his small face pale. Saris went first. She stepped into the shimmer and vanished. Adrian took a deep breath. Okay, kid. Our turn. He picked Leo up, settling him on his hip, and stepped through. It was not a place. It was a memory. He was back on Cygnus 3. The sky was burning. The air tasted of plasma and copper. He was 25 years old, and his unit was dying. He saw his sister, Clara, but it was wrong. She wasn't on Delphi Prime. She was here, in his memory of the battle, wearing a diplomat's uniform, holding her hands up. It's a mistake. Aid, she was yelling, as a dragon shifter in Malik's personal guard leveled its rifle. Tell them we're the good guys. Clara, run, he screamed, but his voice was a whisper. He tried to raise his rifle, but his limbs were like lead. You left me, she said, her voice suddenly cold, accusatory. You were the soldier. You were supposed to protect us. Why did you survive? The dragon fired. The plasma bolt consumed her. No, Adrian roared, staggering. He felt Leo clinging to him, shivering. It's not real. It's a lie! It's a lie! He pushed forward, forcing his way through the suffocating memory. The image of his sister's accusing face burned behind his eyelids. He stumbled out of the shimmer, falling to his knees on the other side. He was back in the crystal cavern. Leo was crying softly. Saris was there, leaning against the wall, her face ashen. "What did you see?" Adrian gasped, his heart hammering. "My ancestors," she whispered, her voice shaking. "The first ones? They weren't just building. They were burning. They were wiping entire worlds clean to make space for their order. Worlds of primitive, sentient beings. The first human colonies before Earth had spaceflight. We have been killing you for so much longer than you know." She looked at him, her imperial pride shattered, replaced by a raw, personal shame. The trial had shown them both the same truth. From opposite sides, the war between their species was built on a foundation of unforgivable sins. Before them lay the sunken archive. It was a vast, hollow sphere, as if they were standing inside a geode. The walls were not golden obsidian, but a single, flawless, diamond-like crystal that pulsed with the slow, steady heartbeat of the planet. And carved into every inch of that crystal, coiling and branching like a living nervous system, was the dragon lattice. It was not text. It was a landscape. It glowed with an internal, white gold light, a language so complex and beautiful it hurt the eyes. The prime runes, Saris breathed in awe. Leo, his fear momentarily forgotten, squirmed out of Adrian's arms. He was mesmerized. "It's like my drawing," he whispered. He toddled forward, his small hand outstretched, before either Adrian or Saris could react. He was drawn to it, a child reaching for a beautiful light. He pressed his palm flat against the wall. This time, there was no sound. There was no explosion. There was only light. The entire chamber, the entire planet, flared with a white, silent brilliance. "Leo!" Adrian yelled, lunging forward. He grabbed his nephew's shoulder, his hand covering Leo's. The moment his skin touched Leo's, and Leo's touched the wall, the circuit was completed. The world vanished. Adrian was no longer in the cavern. He was not in his body. He was elsewhere. He was floating in an infinite space, not of stars, but of code. He saw the lattice from the inside. It was a web of living light, a multi-dimensional construct holding the fabric of reality together. He saw the threads of gravity, the equations for light, the complex, coiled chains of life. And he saw the shadow, in the center of the web, bound by the thickest, brightest strands, was a hole, a patch of uncreation, the null maw. It was not screaming. It was whispering. It whispered of rest, of the relief of oblivion. It whispered of the pointlessness of struggle, the joy of letting go, the perfect peace of non-existence. It called to the part of him that was tired, the part that wanted his sister back, the part that was so weary of fighting. Rest. Let go. It is so easy. Then, the whispers were drowned out by a new sensation. Fire. He looked down, in this abstract space, and saw his self, and on his chest, his scar was blazing. It was no longer a wound. It was a node. The runes from the wall, the prime code of reality, were flowing into him, not rejecting him. They found his scar and latched onto it, integrating, merging. The lattice recognized him. A voice, which was not a voice, filled his consciousness. It was a stream of pure data, fragmented, ancient, unexpected, alien, node active, query lineage, assessing blood of Earth. Yes, but seed memory detected. Aurelian line, Imperial Alpha, a fracture, a graft, the war weapon, unintentional inheritance. The catalyst is two-part. The hand and the vessel. Compatibility confirmed. Alien. Royal. Both. A new equation. Adrian screamed as the full, terrifying implication hit him. The weapon Malik had used, the one that should have vaporized him, had been draconic. A prototype based on the royal line's own energy signature. It hadn't just scarred him. It had grafted a piece of their fundamental code, a seed memory, into his very DNA. He was no longer just human. He was, in the eyes of the Lattice, a bastard prince, an accidental heir. He tore his hand from Leo's, breaking the connection. He was back in the chamber, on his hands and knees, gasping for air. Leo was sitting on the floor, looking dazed but unharmed. Adrian, Saris, was at his side, her hands on his shoulders. "What happened? What did you see?" "Your scar I saw was glowing through your shirt." Adrian pushed her hand away, scrambling back, his mind reeling in panic. He couldn't tell her. God, he couldn't tell her. If she knew, she wouldn't see him as an ally, or even an enemy. She would see him as an abomination, a human contaminated with her ancestors' sacred code, or worse, a tool, a living, breathing key. "Nothing," he choked out, forcing the word past his terror. "I saw the void, the maw. It spoke." He tried to stand, but his legs were shaking. He had wanted to find a crack in the mountain. Now he had discovered the mountain was a part of him. His revenge, his identity, his entire world, it was all collapsing. "We have to go," Sarah said, her voice taut with alarm. She was looking at the entrance. "Adrian, now!" He followed her gaze. The shimmering portal of the antechamber was gone. In its place, blocking the only exit, stood a line of Malik's Imperial Guard, their armor black and gold, their weapons charged and aimed directly at them. High Chancellor Malik himself was not there, but his chief adjutant, a massive dragon shifter named Vorlag, stepped forward. "By order of the High Chancellor," Vorlag boomed, his voice devoid of any emotion. "This archive is now under Imperial security protocol to protect it from alien contamination." His weapon centered on Leo. "Princess Saris, your complicity has been noted. You will stand aside and surrender the human child and the contaminated liaison." Saris didn't move. She slowly, deliberately, drew the sidearm she carried, a sleek, silver energy pistol. She stood between the guards and Adrian, between her entire life of loyalty and the two beings who had shown her the truth. Vorlag raised his rifle. "Stand aside, Princess. That is your final warning." Saris raised her weapon, but she didn't aim it at the guards. She aimed it squarely at Adrian. He looked at her, his mind too fractured to even register betrayal. He just felt a cold, final emptiness. "Saris," he whispered. Her hand was shaking. Her golden eyes locked on his, filled with a desperate, unreadable conflict. She had to choose. The Empire, or them. The silence in the sunken archive was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb, a vacuum waiting for a command. Adrian stared at the silver pistol in Saris's hand. The weapon was steady, aimed directly at his heart. He saw her knuckles, white. Her hand was shaking, not with indecision, but with a terrible, contained energy. Vorlag, Malik's adjutant, permitted himself a thin, cruel smile. "A wise choice, Princess. The royal line knows when to purge its contaminants. Surrender the humans." "I am making a choice, Captain," Saris said, her voice a low, dangerous hiss. The betrayal Adrian had felt, a cold, hollow emptiness, was suddenly replaced by confusion. Her golden eyes were locked on his, and in them, he saw not surrender. He saw an apology. She did not fire at him. In one fluid motion, she pivoted and fired her weapon at the wall of the archive itself. The pistol discharged a bolt of coherent, superheated plasma. It struck the glowing crystalline surface of the prime runes. It was heresy, made manifest. The crystal did not shatter. It screamed. It was a psychic, subsonic shriek that tore through the cavern. A sound of pure, agonizing violation. The living lattice, the code of reality, had been wounded. Vorlog and his armored guards cried out, dropping their rifles, their hands flying to their helmets. To the dragons, their senses deeply attuned to the lattice. The feedback was physically agonizing. It was like a railroad spike being driven through their minds. They crumpled to their knees, blinded and deafened by the psychic static. "Go now," Saris screamed, grabbing Adrian's arm and yanking him toward the maintenance shaft. Adrian snatched Leo, who was crying in terror, and plunged after her onto the work platform. Saris slammed her hand on the activation panel, and the platform shot upward, ascending into the darkness just as the guards began to recover, firing wildly into the shaft below them. They emerged, not in her lab, but on a lower concourse of the palace. The air was wrong. The calm, ambient hum of the living crystal was gone, replaced by a frantic, discordant thrum. Red alert runes flashed on the walls, painting the corridor in rhythmic, bloody light. "He did it," Saris whispered, horrified. "He was just waiting for a pretext." "Waiting for what?" Adrian demanded, setting Leo on his feet. A voice, amplified by the palace's internal systems, boomed through the hall. It was Malik's. It was not the voice of a supplicant. It was the voice of a ruler. "Citizens of the Empire," Malik's voice declared, dripping with feigned regret and iron certainty. "It is with a heavy heart that I must inform you of a grave betrayal. The Princess Saris, of the royal line, has been compromised. In her weakness, she has allied with the alien contaminants from Earth, granting them access to the most sacred heart of our world, the sunken archive." Soldiers in Malik's black and gold armor ran past the corridor's intersection, not even sparing them a glance, focused on some larger objective. "This act of heresy," Malik continued, "this desecration, has caused a catastrophic resonance in the Dragon Lattice, further weakening the seals that protect us all from the Null Maw. The princess and her human allies are now fugitives, guilty of high treason and reckless endangerment of the imperial state." "He was waiting for me," Saris breathed, her face pale. "He knew I would go. He let us, just so he could use my heresy as the trigger for his coup." "What about the king?" Adrian asked. The emperor, overwhelmed by his daughter's betrayal and the severe shock to the lattice, has been placed in protective stasis in the imperial vault, Malik's voice concluded. "Until he recovers, and until this alien threat is purged. I, High Chancellor Malik, am assuming emergency control of the imperial throne and all military forces. We will hunt the traitors. We will stabilize the lattice. We will protect the empire." The soft coup was complete. The palace was now a fortress, and they were the rats trapped inside. "The human embassy," Adrian said, his mind racing. "It's the only place we can—" "They'll be watching it," Saris said. "It's the first place they'll look." "They'll be watching the doors," Adrian corrected. "Not the back way." He led them, running, through a maze of service corridors. But even here, Malik's control was absolute. They reached a massive bulkhead, a solid wall of metal and crystal. Sarah stepped up to the terminal. She placed her hand on it, speaking a complex, multisyllabic command in the high, draconic tongue. The terminal flashed red. A synthesized voice replied, "Access denied. Command authority. High Chancellor." "He's locked me out," Sarah said, stunned. "My own family's palace. He's locked me out of the system." "You're thinking like a dragon," Adrian said, his eyes scanning the walls. "You're thinking about permissions and authority. You're trying to unlock the front door, He pointed up, to a dark, narrow gap in the ceiling where a series of thick power conduits ran. You build these magnificent, living palaces, but you still need maintenance shafts. You dragons are too proud to crawl. Saris looked at the gap, her royal sensibilities clearly offended. That is filthy. It's a way out. Adrian hoisted Leo onto his shoulders. Welcome to human ingenuity, princess. We're excellent crawlers. He found a foothold and scrambled up, pushing a loose grate aside, and pulled Saris up after him. They moved through the cramped, dark, and dusty shaft, the grand resonant hum of the palace replaced by the skittering of maintenance drones. They emerged, covered in grime, into another service junction. This one was blocked by a door with a complex, glowing lock. It was not a handprint scanner. It was a shifting matrix of runes, a complex, timed puzzle. Saris studied it. This is old, she whispered. A harmonic sequence lock. It will take me several minutes to, Leo, who had been clutched in Adrian's arms, was bored, scared, and frustrated. He still had his nano stylus in his pocket. He had never dropped it. He saw the glowing wall. He saw the pretty, shifting patterns. And he did what a 6-year-old does. He squirmed free, ran to the wall, and drew. He didn't draw a house. He just scribbled, a long, angry, lopsided spiral, right across the face of the ancient, complex lock. The runes on the lock flickered, stuttered, and then froze. The entire terminal sparked, a cascade of white light, and then became dark. With a heavy, pneumatic sigh, the massive door slid open. Saris stared, her mouth open. That is impossible. That is not a valid command. That is not a command at all. It's noise. Adrian let out a short, sharp laugh. He couldn't help it. It's human logic. Saris, your entire system is built in order, on perfect, complex, logical sequences. He just introduced a variable your ancestors never accounted for pure, unfiltered, illogical chaos. He didn't pick the lock. He crashed it. He scooped Leo up, kissing him on the head. Humanity. Fuck yeah, kid. They ran, using a series of old diplomatic exfiltration routes that Adrian had memorized, a relic of his soldiers' paranoia. They reached the human embassy, expecting to find it under siege. Instead, it was quiet, calm. The Terran guards at the entrance, who should have been loyal to him, simply watched him, their faces blank. They didn't raise their weapons. They just let him in. It's a trap, Saris hissed, her hand on her pistol. I know, Adrian said, but it's the only one we've got. They walked into the main delegation chamber. Director Hale was standing by his desk, calmly sipping a cup of tea. He was flanked by 2 of Milik's Imperial Guards, their black armor a stark contrast to the embassy's human decor. Adrian, Hale said, his voice laced with disappointment. You've made a terrible, terrible mess. I was this close to negotiating the greatest technological leap in human history. You traitor, Adrian spat. He pushed Saris and Leo behind him, his body coiled. I am a realist, Hale snapped, his calm facade breaking. Malik has won. The Emperor is gone. The royal line is a fugitive. The only move left was to secure our species' future. By selling my nephew. By using an asset. Hale slammed his cup down. This lattice is the key to our independence. Malik was prepared to give us access. A partnership. In exchange for the boy. 1 life. Adrian. For 8 billion. It is simple, brutal math. But you, with your sentiment, you had to play the hero. That's not math. Hale, that's cowardice, Adrian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. You're not saving humanity. You're just negotiating the terms of our collar. We are a species that is supposed to climb mountains, not sell our children to the monsters living at the top. That is a very nice speech, soldier, Hale sneered. But in the real world, we make ugly deals to survive. You should have. Hale's words were cut off by a sound that no one in the room had ever heard. It was not an explosion. It was the sound of reality tearing. A low, guttural vibration shook the entire palace. Not a tremor from the ground, but a shudder from the sky itself. Every person in the room, Adrian, Cyrus, Hale, even the dragon guards, was drawn to the massive windows. They looked up. The sky above Aurea, normally a perfect, engineered violet, was cracked. Like a sheet of black ice struck by a hammer, a jagged fissure of pure, absolute nothingness had split the atmosphere. It was a wound in the world, and from that wound, the null maw, the sentient void, was leaking. The void, a shimmering, oily patch of anti-existence, dripped from the crack. It touched the tip of the adjacent spire of Ascension, one of the tallest, most beautiful crystal structures in the city. The spire did not explode. It did not melt. It simply ceased. The top 1,000 feet of the tower were eaten, erased from reality, as if they had never existed. A collective, citywide scream of pure, primal terror rose from the planet below. Alarms, deep and resonant, began to wail across Aurea. Hale stumbled back, his face white with shock. "What is that? That wasn't part of the deal." Sirius looked at the sky, her scientific mind overcome with sheer, unadulterated dread. "Milik," she whispered. "That's insane he did it. He's forcing the crisis. To consolidate his power, he's proving the danger is real by unleashing it." Malik had gone to the throne room, the main terminal, and used his own ambition, his own corrupted power, to poke the failing lattice. He had intentionally widened one of the leaks. The distraction was all Adrian needed. While the guards were frozen, staring at the sky, Adrian moved. He was no diplomat. He was a soldier. He didn't hesitate. He launched himself at Hale, not to harm him, but to use him. He slammed the director backward, grabbing the man's sidearm from its holster. He fired 2 precise, economical shots. The Imperial Guards, still looking at the window, hadn't even had time to register the new threat. The plasma bolts struck their unshielded necks, and they dropped. Adrian hauled Hale to his feet, pressing the barrel of the pistol to the director's temple. "You wanted a deal, Hale," Adrian snarled, dragging him toward the door. "You just dealt us all with that, and you're going to help us fix it." They fled the embassy, dragging their new hostage. Just as Malik's reinforcements arrived, chaos was their cover. The palace was in pandemonium. Nobles and servants alike were screaming, running, as more black fissures began to spiderweb across the sky. They found a secure communications node, a small, shielded room that Adrian had used for his intelligence gathering. "We have to get off planet," Saris said, her voice shaking as she watched a monitor showing the spreading void. "A shuttle. Anything." "And go where, Saris?" Adrian countered, tying Hale to a chair. "That thing is eating reality. There is no off-planet that's safe. There is no away. The only way to stop this is to fix the lattice." "How?" she yelled. "The archive is sealed. Milik's forces are everywhere." "We don't need the archive," Adrian said, a terrible, desperate calm settling over him. "We need the terminal, the place where this all started, the place Milik just used." Saris's blood ran cold. "The Grand Throne Room." "It's the only place with full system access," Adrian said. "It's the only place we can interface with the lattice to undo what Milik just did." "It's the most heavily guarded place in the galaxy right now," Saris stated, seeing the insanity of the plan. "Exactly," Adrian said. "They'll all be at the doors. They won't be expecting anyone to come from underneath." He turned to the comms. "It's a suicide mission, but it's the only one we've got." He activated his illegal military compound. This is Cole. Adrian Cole. Liaison Corps. Director Hale is a traitor. He has allied with Malik. Malik has just unleashed the Null Maw over the city. This is not a drill. Any Terran officer, any human who still remembers what that word means, who isn't part of Hale's deal, I need you. I'm at the secure node Delta 9. We are taking back the throne room, or we all die. Beside him, Saris used her own royal-coded device. This is Princess Saris. Malik has usurped the throne. He has poisoned my father. He has broken the lattice and unleashed the Maw to secure his power. All who are still loyal to the true Aurelian line. All who wish to save this world, I call you to me. Delta 9. We fight for the dawn. For a long, agonizing minute, there was only silence. Then, 2 green lights blinked on Adrian's console. Then 3 more. On Saris's. A half-dozen royalist authentications appeared. They had an army. It was a tiny, desperate, pathetic army. But it was a start. They fought their way through the palace. It was a brutal, running battle through corridors of crystal and light, now choked with smoke and fear. Malik's forces were divided, trying to contain the citywide panic while also hunting the fugitives. The small, combined force of human soldiers and dragon royalists took them by surprise. They used Adrian's crawler tactics, a mix of human guerrilla warfare and draconic power that Malik's rigid forces couldn't predict. They reached the sublevels beneath the Grand Throne Room. They could hear the roar of Malik's main force outside the massive doors, trying to hold back the tide of panicked, rioting nobles. Adrian found the grate. They were in. They emerged, one by one, into the vast, dark hall. The magnificent chamber was lit only by the frantic, flashing red of the alert runes and the sickly, unstable flickering of the throne wall. The golden obsidian was no longer bright. It was chittering, the ancient runes flashing and dying like a failing neon sign. Outside the massive windows, the sky was a lattice of black, weeping wounds. They were in, but they were trapped. Malik's army was at the gates. The void was at the windows. Adrian looked at the wall. He looked at Saris, her face grim. He looked at Leo, clutching his stylus. He thought of Clara. He thought of his burning, all-consuming hatred for this place, for this throne, for the arrogance it represented. He had come here dreaming of the day he would see this palace fall. And now it was. He was watching his own dark fantasy come true. And it was going to take Earth, Leo, and all of reality with it. His revenge, he realized, had become an ironic, terrible, crushing responsibility. He could stand here and let his hatred win, watch the void consume them all. Or he could fight for the very system he had sworn to destroy. He walked past the throne, the source of all his pain, and stood before the flickering, dying wall. "Okay," Adrian Cole muttered, his voice raw. "Let's save the damned kingdom." The Grand Throne Room was a cage of failing technology and cosmic horror. Outside, the sky wept black, entropic tears. Inside, the massive, rune-etched wall flickered, its light faltering like a dying heart. "Barricade the doors!" Adrian yelled. His small, combined force of loyalist humans and dragon royalists moved, shoving overturned crystal benches and sections of shattered statuary against the massive main entrances. They could hear the pounding of Malik's army on the other side, a rhythmic, metallic thunder. Saris ran to the wall, ignoring the chaos. "It's a terminal, but it's locked down. Malik's coup, he's firewalling the system from here. I can't get in." "What about the blood thing?" Adrian shouted, firing his pistol at a drone that had squeezed through a ventilation shaft. The bolt hit it, and it exploded in a shower of sparks. "The royal line, you said?" "That's a myth, a ritual. She looked at the wall, then at her own hand. But what if it's not? What if it's a bioauthentication? She didn't hesitate. She drew a small, sharp crystal blade from her boot, a last-ditch royalist weapon, and sliced her palm open. A line of blue-silver, oxygen-rich draconic blood welled up. She slammed her bleeding hand flat against the golden obsidian wall. "By the First Empress!" she commanded, her voice ringing with an ancient authority she had never known she possessed. "Grant me access. I am Ceres Aurelian. Open." For a second, nothing happened. Then, the wall flared. It was not the chaotic, failing flicker from before. It was a blinding, solid wave of pure, white gold light. The runes stabilized, burning with a fierce, renewed intensity. A psychic wave of permission washed over the room. On every display, the red access denied message was replaced by a glowing, golden administrative access granted. She had full control. But the sky outside responded in kind. The fissures widened, the darkness of the null maw sensing a new, more powerful connection. It was not just leaking, it was surging. A torrent of pure void poured into Auria's atmosphere, and a psychic pressure wave slammed into the hall. Everyone, dragon and human, cried out, clutching their heads. It was a wave of pure despair, a billion voices whispering of loss, failure, and the relief of death. Leo, who had been hiding behind the throne, whimpered. He stared at the newly lit wall, his eyes wide, not with fear, but with a strange, trance-like focus. "It's empty," he whispered. "It needs lines." "Leo, no, get back," Adrian yelled, but the boy was already moving. He ran to the wall, his nanostylus in his fist. He wasn't drawing a house. He was drawing what he saw. He drew frantic, complex, interlocking spirals, his small hand tracing patterns of light. He was connecting the newly opened lattice to the black, weeping fissures in the sky. The null maw roared. It was a soundless, psychic bellow of triumph. The darkness in the sky began to pour toward the wall, focusing, channeling. Leo, in his innocence, was building at a bridge. "Stop him!" Ceres screamed. But it was too late. The main doors of the throne room, the ones they had barricaded, buckled. Not from the outside, but from the inside. The barricade was pushed aside by an invisible, crushing force. High Chancellor Malik strode into the room. He was alone. His black and gold armor was pristine. His face was calm, almost serene. He no longer looked like a usurper. He looked like a god. In his gauntleted hand, he held a dark, jagged shard of what looked like obsidian, but it drank the light from the room. It was a corrupted piece of the sunken archive, a fragment of the prime runes, and it was pulsing with a black, oily light. "He's connected," Ceres breathed, her blood running cold. "Ancestors. He's bonded with it. He's not just using the lattice. He is the Maw's conduit." "Thank you for opening the door, Princess," Malik said, his voice a horrifying, layered duet of his own resonant tone and the dry, billion-voiced whisper of the void. "I was finding it difficult to gain full administrative control." He looked at Leo, scribbling on the wall. "Good boy. You have built the very weapon that will purge this galaxy of your insignificant kind." He raised his corrupted shard. He was not aiming it at them. He was aiming it at the wall. He was going to seize control of the full, unlocked terminal. "No," Adrian yelled. He felt the scar on his chest ignite. It was not a phantom pain. It was a call. The white-hot light of the lattice on the wall, the royal code series had unlocked, was resonating with the royal seed grafted into his flesh. He finally understood. Leo was the key. Ceres was the hand that turned it. But he was at the door. He had a choice. He could fight Malik here, in the physical world, and be vaporized. Or he could go where Malik truly was. He made the choice that was not a choice. He closed his eyes, ignored the physical battle, and pushed his consciousness, his very self, into the scar. He didn't just touch the lattice. He became it. Adrian. He heard Saris scream, a distant, fading echo. His, Saris's, and Leo's consciousnesses, all three of them touching the terminal, were torn from their bodies and dragged into the abstract. They were in rune space. It was the infinite, coded landscape Adrian had seen before, but now it was a war zone. The perfect, glowing web was being torn apart. Strands of code, representing laws of physics, were snapping, black. Oily tendrils of the maw were coiling around the central structure, squeezing. And in the center, a new figure floated. It was Malik, but he was no longer in humanoid form. He was a colossal shadow dragon, his scales made of pure, shifting darkness, his eyes burning with the cold light of dead stars. He was ripping apart the very code of the universe. As they watched, Malik seized a complex, glowing strand. The strand, Adrian somehow knew, was the fundamental definition of humanity, their creativity, their flaws, their chaotic, illogical biology. Malik pulled. He was trying to delete them from the program. "Only dragons will remain," the shadow Malik boomed, his voice echoing through the non-space. "They are the only species worthy of existence," the null maw whispered, its voice now amplified, coiling around Adrian's own consciousness, sensing his old, familiar hatred. Yes, revenge. He would deny you. Let us consume him. Let us consume them all. You have suffered. You deserve this. Let it all end. Adrian felt his own abstract form begin to waver, his hatred agreeing with the void. It was so easy. Just let go. No, a new voice, Saris's, echoed beside him. Her form was a pillar of golden light, resisting the darkness. She was fighting, trying to rewrite the code Malik was tearing apart. But she was too slow. Leo was there, too. A small, fading spark of blue light. He was trying to draw, trying to reconnect the broken strands, but his light was weakening. The psychic pressure was too much for his young mind. His lines of code were becoming erratic, failing. The lattice sensed its own destruction. It sensed Malik, the corrupted user. It sensed Saris, the rightful heir. And it sensed Adrian, the anomaly, the impossible equation. The white gold light of the lattice abandoned Saris. It flowed away from the royal line, and it flooded into Adrian. The voice of the lattice, the one he had heard in the archive, spoke again, not in fragments, but in a clear, decisive, terrifying stream of data. New equation confirmed. Vessel compatible. The dragon line is stasis. The alien line is chaos. Both are required. Administrative control transferred to Node Cole. Adrian screamed as the full, unimaginable power of the dragon lattice, the operating system of reality, poured into him. He was no longer just a man. He was the server. He saw it all. He saw Malik's intent. He saw the Maw's hunger. And he saw his choice, laid bare in lines of brutal code. Pathway 1. He could open the gates. He could amplify the Maw, just as it whispered, and channel its full, unmaking power directly at Malik, and at the throne, and at the Empire. It would be the ultimate revenge. Clara would be avenged. It would be a fire to end all things. But the code was clear. The Maw did not discriminate. It would consume Leo. It would consume Earth. It would consume everything. Pathway 2. He could use his newfound power to seize the broken strands and reweave them. He could become the new Locke. He could pour his own life force, his consciousness, into the gap and seal the Maw. He would save them all. But the lattice was also clear it would require a permanent user. He would be bound to it, forever. He would become the warden, A mind trapped in the machine, no longer human, no longer anything but a gatekeeper, living between the void and reality for eternity, revenge and oblivion, or sacrifice and a living death. He felt his hatred, his grief for Clara, surge. He reached for pathway 1. He would burn them all. "Adrian! Look!" Saris's light form flashed beside him. She was not fighting Mdim. She was holding up a new strand of code, a memory. But it was not his. It was hers. The code played out. A perfect, agonizing, three-dimensional recording. He saw Delphi Prime. He saw the massacre. He saw the Dragon Guards, Milik's personal guard, firing on the diplomatic mission. He saw his sister, Clara. She was not running. She was not begging. She was standing in front of a small creche, a dragon preschool. She had her arms spread wide, shielding the doorway. Inside, a half-dozen small, terrified reptilian dragon children were cowering. A guard, the same one from his false memory, leveled his rifle. "It's a mistake," Clara yelled, just as he remembered. "They're just children. Don't you see? They're just children." "They are dragon spawn," the guard snarled. "Move! Human!" "No," she said, and the guard fired. Clara died, not as a senseless victim, but as a soldier. She died protecting the innocent. She died choosing to end the cycle, not continue it. And then the memory shifted, moving inside the creche. Adrian saw the scene from the other side, through the eyes of one of the children. He saw the human woman fall. He saw the small, terrified, golden-eyed dragon child who had been hiding behind the door. He was seeing Saris's own memory. "She saved me," Saris's voice whispered. Full of pain and shame, he now understood. "I was there. I saw it. My father Malik covered it up. They called her a terrorist, but she was a hero. Your sister died saving me." The entire foundation of his revenge, the cold, hard diamond of his hatred, shattered into dust. He had been trying to avenge a massacre that was, in its final, critical moment, a sacrifice. Malik, the shadow dragon, sensed the shift. "Heroics are a weakness. Sentiment is a flaw in the code. You will all be deleted." The null maw surged, sensing Adrian's hesitation, his confusion. It lashed out, its whispers turning to a roar, feeding on his agony. But it was no longer hatred. It was grief. And grief was not a food the maw understood. Adrian looked at the shadow Malik. He looked at the screaming void. And he looked at Saris's light and Leo's fading spark. His revenge was dead. But his sister's choice was alive. He turned away from pathway 1. He rejected pathway 2. "You want to delete us," he thought, his human mind now in control of a cosmic system, blazing with a new, strange, and utterly alien idea. "You think sentiment is a flaw." He didn't try to fight Malik. He didn't try to seal the maw. He did something only a human would do. He rewrote the code. He grabbed the fundamental algorithm of the null maw, the part of it that fed on fear, ambition, and hatred. And he added a new variable. He programmed humor into the equation. He inserted the concept of self-deprecation. He coded the logic of irony. He dumped his entire, messy, sarcastic, human personality, all his jokes, his cynicism, his ability to laugh at his own pain directly into the maw's operating system. The void was a creature of pure, absolute, singular malice. It was the shadow of dragon arrogance. It understood hate. It understood fear. It had no programming for mockery. The null maw stuttered. Its psychic roar of terror faltered, confused. This new input was illogical. It was self-defeating. It was noisy. How could a being hate something and laugh at it at the same time? How could a victim mock his own pain? The void's connection to Malik flickered. Malik, whose entire being was now bonded to that singular absolute hate, felt the logical contradiction tear through his consciousness. "What is this?" the shadow dragon roared, clutching his head. "This is not this chaos. It is wrong. It's called perspective, you son of a bitch." Adrian's voice echoed through the rune space. "It's called getting over yourself." He pushed the new code harder, amplifying it, feeding the void a diet of pure, undiluted human absurdity. The Null Maw recoiled. This new food was poison. This new logic was incompatible. It was a virus in its ancient, arrogant system. It could not maintain its grip on reality. Its black tendrils, confused and disrupted, began to retract from the lattice. "No," Milik screamed. He was bonded to the void. As it fled, it pulled him with it. His shadow form was unmade, torn apart by the two conflicting logics. He was a creature of absolute purpose, and Adrian had just infected him with the concept of pointlessness. He dissolved, not into light, but into nothing. He was a bug, deleted by a patch he could not comprehend. The battle was over. In the grand throne room, the physical world snapped back into focus. The pounding on the doors stopped. The screaming in the city died. There was a single, blinding flash of pure, white gold light from the throne wall. High Chancellor Malik, who had been standing before them, a god of the void, simply vanished. The corrupted shard in his hand fell to the floor and dissolved into inert dust. Adrian, Saris, and Leo collapsed, their bodies released from the interface. Adrian looked up, his chest heaving. Outside the windows, the black, weeping fissures in the sky were healing. They zipped shut, one by one, like a cosmic suture, leaving behind a sky that was clear, violet, and perfectly, beautifully whole. The throne room wall, the great terminal, stopped flickering. It settled into a new, stable, permanent glow. But it was not the golden light of the old empire. It was a soft, pale, opalescent white, and the ancient runes, the language of the dragons, had changed. They were still there, but interwoven with them, in perfect, mathematical balance, was a new set of symbols, human symbols. Leo's lopsided house, the stick figure of his mother with wings, the chaotic, illogical, angry spiral he had drawn on the lock. It was no longer just the dragon lattice. It was an equation, dragon and human, order and chaos. Two symbols, bound together, stable at last. The silence that fell in the grand throne room was heavier than the psychic weight of the Null Maw. The battle, both physical and conceptual, had ended not with a bang, but with a sudden, echoing quiet. The newly balanced runes on the wall, half ancient dragon script, half human chaos, pulsed with a soft, stable, opalescent light, casting a pearlescent glow over the exhausted survivors. Milik was gone, deleted, his army, cut off from his iron-fisted control and, witnessing the sky heal itself, had dissolved into a panicked, confused rabble. The coup, built on a foundation of manufactured fear, collapsed the instant the fear was vanquished. A week later, the Emperor was released from the protective stasis Malik had placed him in. He emerged not as a ruler, but as an old man, his immense, ancient power seeming to have drained from him, leaving only a brittle, weary shell. He stood in the throne room, staring at the new wall. Saris and Adrian stood with him. "For 10,000 years, the Emperor said, his voice a dry rustle. "We believed the lattice was our strength, our divine right. We never saw that it was our prison, just as it was the Maw's." He turned his ancient eyes, no longer burning with stellar fire, but clouded with a profound, weary understanding, to Saris. "Malik did not create this crisis," the Emperor said. "He was merely the final symptom of it. My ambition created him. My father's fear. My ancestors' arrogance. We built a system on the belief that we were the only answer, and in doing so, we fed the shadow that defined itself by our certainty. We fed the maw with every world we conquered, every species we subjugated. He looked at Adrian. Your people, your child, they did not break the lattice. They balanced it. They introduced the one variable we never possessed, the humility to accept chaos. He let out a long, slow breath, a sound like a mountain settling. The age of absolute rule is over. The Dragon Empire, as it was, must end. He placed a trembling, scaled hand on his daughter's shoulder. I am tired. The shock of the lattice rewriting itself. The touch of the maw, I am too old for such things. He formally renounced his absolute authority, his voice too quiet for a decree, yet more powerful than any edict he had ever issued. He would retire to the Elder Caves, to meditate on the new future. He was named Ceres, not Empress, but Regent of the new conquered. Your first duty, he commanded her, his voice firm for one last moment, is not to rule, it is to listen. Build a council, not of dragons, but of all. The humans, the Cathar, the Fen, all those we called vassal. Their voices must now be part of the lattice. That is your only condition. He nodded once to Adrian, a gesture of profound, unstated gratitude. And then he was gone, walking slowly out of the throne room he would never enter again. Adrian watched him go, feeling a strange absence of triumph. His revenge had been so total, so abstract, that it had consumed itself, leaving only a complex, heavy reality in its wake. He was part of that new reality. He had survived, but he had not emerged unchanged. He looked at his own arms, faint, opalescent lines, like living tattoos, now traced their way from his old scar, branching across his chest, down his arms, and ending at his fingertips. They were invisible in most light, but when he was near the throne wall, or when he thought about the lattice, they glowed with a soft, white light. The lattice had chosen him as its warden. He had not been trapped, as he feared, but he was bound. He was a living node. He could feel the lattice, a constant, low-level thrum in his blood, a universe of data just beneath his skin. And he could feel the null maw, a distant, cold spot, a quiet, sleeping nothingness that was no longer angry, just waiting. He was no longer entirely human. The alien seed memory of the dragon line was now fully integrated, stabilized by the new code. But he was certainly not a dragon. He was something new, a bridge made of flesh and scar tissue. A few days later, he found Leo sitting on a balcony, his legs dangling, staring at the healed sky. The boy had been quiet, withdrawn, since the battle. Hey, buddy, Adrian said, sitting beside him. You okay? You've barely touched your alien goo pops. Am I still magic? Leo asked, not looking at him. Adrian's heart ached. What do you mean? The wall, I drew, and it changed. But now, Leo held up his nano-stylus. It's just a pen. I drew on the wall in my new room. And it's just a drawing. It's just ink. It's not magic anymore. The profound, crushing disappointment of a 6-year-old who had touched godhood and been returned to mortality. Ceres walked up, sitting on Leo's other side. You were never magic, Leo, she said, her voice gentle. The new regent of the empire taking a moment to talk to one small boy. But I saved everyone, Leo mumbled, his lower lip trembling. I drew the lines. I was the hand from the distant sky. No, Ceres said, ruffling his hair. You were something much more important. You were the one who knocked. The prophecies, the legends. They were all just dragons being dramatic. They were waiting for a magical chosen one to arrive. Adrian picked up the thread, a small, genuine smile on his face. And what they got, he said, was a bored 6-year-old kid from Earth who scribbled on their wall because the speeches were too long. You weren't a savior, Leo. You were an accident. A glorious, galaxy-saving, cosmic accident. Leo looked from Adrian to Saris. An accident. The best kind, Saris affirmed. You didn't fulfill a prophecy. You broke it. You proved it wrong. You taught the oldest, proudest species in the universe that they knew nothing. And that's much better than being magic. Adrian tapped Leo on the nose. You don't have to be a savior, kid. You don't have to carry the weight of all this. He gestured to the palace, the sky. You just have to be Leo. And right now, being a normal kid is the most valuable, most precious thing in the whole galaxy. That's a freedom you just won for yourself. Leo considered this. A slow smile spread across his face. So I'm an accident. A Galaxy Class 1, Adrian confirmed. Cool. The disappointment was gone. He was free. He was just a kid. He hopped off the ledge and ran inside, yelling for a goop hop. The lightness of that moment stood in stark contrast to the event the following week, the trial of Director Hale. It was the first act of the new Interspecies Council. It was held in a small, formal chamber, not the Grand Throne Room. The judges were not just Dragon Lords. The panel consisted of Saris, as regent, a grizzled dragon general who had been loyal to the Emperor, and, at Saris's insistence, Adrian, representing humanity. Hale was brought in. He was not in chains. He was composed, wearing his immaculate Terran diplomatic suit. He still carried the air of a man who believed he was the only sane person in the room. Director Hale, Saris began, her voice formal. You are charged with conspiracy against the Terran Diplomatic Corps, collusion with a hostile usurper, and the attempted trafficking of a human minor for political and technological gain. I plead not guilty, Hale said, his voice calm, projecting to the room. I plead pragmatism. I did what I did not for personal gain, but for the survival of the human race. A race that Liaison Cole, in his sentimentality, was willing to sacrifice. Survival at what cost, Director? Adrian asked, his voice quiet. The runes on his arms were hidden beneath his uniform, but he could feel them itching. At any cost, Hale snapped, his composure finally breaking, his eyes finding Adrian's. You do not understand, do you? You, with your new dragon magic and your pet princess. We were ants, coal ants at the feet of gods, and I was given a chance to steal the gods' fire. One child, one insignificant, acceptable loss in exchange for the power to guarantee that Earth would never, ever be threatened again. It was the only logical move. And what kind of humanity would be left to make that deal? Adrian countered. He stood, walking down from the dais to stand in front of Hales. You're right. We were ants. But you were so desperate to be a dragon that you forgot what it meant to be an ant. We're small. We're fragile. We're chaotic and illogical and sentimental. He leaned in. And that's why we won. That's what the lattice needed. Not more arrogance, not more cold, brutal math. It needed us. It needed a bored kid. And it needed a sarcastic, heartbroken soldier. You wanted to trade our humanity for power. But our humanity was the power. You damn fool. You weren't just betraying Leo. You were betraying the very thing that makes us worth saving. He turned to the council. Director Hale believes survival is the only virtue. I believe that a survival that costs us our soul isn't survival at all. It's just a different kind of extinction. The council was silent. Hale stared at him, his face a mask of disbelief, finally understanding that the rules of the universe had fundamentally changed. He had made a cold calculation in a world that was now run by warmth. He was found guilty. He was stripped of his rank and sentenced to be returned to Earth, to be tried by his own people for his crimes against their values. It was a powerful statement. Humanity would police its own soul. With the trial over, the hard work of building a new government began. Saris was true to her father's command. The Interspecies Council was formed, with delegates from a dozen worlds arriving, all of them stunned to find themselves treated as equals. One evening, Saris found Adrian in his new office. It was large, overlooking the capital. "The Terran government has accepted Director Hale's replacement," she said, a small, formal smile on her face. "Oh," Adrian said, not looking up from a data pad. "Who's the new poor bastard they're sending out?" "They are sending no one," Saris said. "They have, upon my formal request, appointed you." Adrian looked up. "Appointed me what?" "Chief Ambassador Plenipotentiary of Earth to the Aurelian Conquered, the highest-ranking human in the galaxy. Congratulations, Ambassador Cole." Adrian just stared at her. "You're kidding me. I'm a cynical, insubordinate, ex-liaison. I'm not an ambassador." "You are," Saris countered, walking closer. "The Warden of the Lattice. You are the only being in the universe who is part dragon and part human. You are the literal, physical embodiment of this new alliance. Frankly, your diplomatic skills are irrelevant. You are a symbol." "I don't want to be a symbol," he muttered. "I don't want to be a regent," she shot back, her formal mask slipping. "And yet, here we are. I also need an advisor. The Lattice, it's quiet, but I can feel it, and you can hear it. I need you by my side. As my advisor on rune lore." He saw the plea beneath the official request. She was alone. He was alone. They were the only two people who truly understood what had happened. "All right, Regent," he sighed. "I'll be your magic consultant, but I'm terrible at paperwork, and I refuse to wear pointy hats." "A sacrifice I am willing to make," she said, her smile becoming genuine. His new position, however, only solidified his new reality. He was a hero to the dragons. He was the Rune Man, the brother of the Empress. They treated him with a reverence that made his skin crawl. His own people were a different story. The human soldiers and staff who had not been part of Hale's conspiracy, the ones who had fought with him, still saw him as their CO. But the new arrivals were different. He was in the mess hall, grabbing a cup of coffee, when a young human technician, new from Earth, flinched as Adrian reached past him. The technician's eyes darted to Adrian's arm, where the faint, opalescent lines were just barely visible under his sleeve. "Sir," the tech stammered, stepping back. "I'm sorry, It's fine, son," Adrian said, his voice gentle. "They don't bite." "Right, of course, sir." The technician practically ran from the room. Adrian stood there, his coffee suddenly cold. A hero to one species, a monster to his own. He was too dragon for the humans, too human for the dragons. He was an ambassador from a nation of one. He took his coffee and went to the only place he felt any sense of quiet. The grand balcony off the regent's chambers. Saris was already there, looking at the stars. The sky was clear, the scars of the maw gone. "Tough day at the office, Ambassador?" she asked, not turning. "Tough day being the local sideshow," he muttered, leaning on the railing beside her. "One of the new techs looked at me like I was going to sprout wings and eat him." "They'll learn," Saris said. "Will they hell? I'm still learning. I was up half the night, Saris. I kept asking myself, am I still human if I got cut? What would I bleed? What am I?" Saris turned to him, her golden eyes soft in the starlight. "You are the man who, when given the power of a god, chose to tell a joke. You infected the void with sarcasm. Adrian, I have run 10,000 simulations. No dragon in the history of our species would have ever conceived of such a thing. It is the most profoundly, ridiculously, stubbornly human act I have ever witnessed. You are more human than anyone I know." He looked at her, at this ancient, powerful, beautiful being who was, like him, trapped in a role she never asked for. He saw the burden she carried. "You're not so bad, yourself," he said quietly. "For a dragon." A comfortable silence settled between them, a shared understanding that needed no words. "So," Adrian said, breaking the silence, "this new alliance, you and me, working together." "Yes," she said. "It will be difficult." "I was just thinking," he said, a slow, sarcastic grin spreading across his face. "If we're going to be this close professionally, we should probably understand each other's cultural norms." She looked at him, confused. "A logical proposal." "Right. So, human dating," Adrian said, ticking points off on his fingers. "Traditionally, it involves awkward small talk, inefficient consumption of overpriced beverages, and a 50% chance of profound disappointment." Saris's eyes widened as she caught his meaning. A slow, rare blush, a faint flush of silver blue, rose on her cheeks. "Draconic courtship," she replied, picking up the game, her voice perfectly deadpan. "Traditionally involves a ritual display of aerial dominance. The presentation of a suitable hoard typically measured in the thousands of tons, and a 500-year binding contract." "So you're saying my coffee and awkwardness isn't going to cut it?" "It is suboptimal," she said, the corner of her mouth twitching. "But perhaps given our unique situation we could negotiate new terms." "I'm willing to compromise," Adrian said, his hand finding hers on the cold crystal railing. "I can probably manage the awkward small talk, but I am drawing the line at the 500-year contract." "I will settle," Saris said, her fingers lacing with his. "For tomorrow." Their small moment of peace was a bubble in a restless ocean, across Aurea, and on the newly liberated vassal worlds. The reforms were beginning. Serf species were granted full citizenship, joint academies, teaching both human sciences and draconic rune theory, were being commissioned. But it was not a perfect peace. Milik was gone. But the arrogance he represented was not. Hardline dragon lords, furious at their loss of status, began to meet in secret, whispering of the half-human regent and her pet alien. And on Earth, factions that had tasted Hale's ambition were not so quick to embrace a human warden who seemed more dragon than man. The new order was fragile. The tug-of-war had just begun. But standing on the balcony, Adrian Cole and Saris Aurelian, the warden and the regent, held on to the fragile, illogical, and perfectly human hope that this time it would be different. 6 months passed. The fragile peace, held together by Saris's political maneuvering and Adrian's symbolic presence, began to take root. The Interspecies Council was a loud, chaotic, and shockingly functional entity. The joint academies were under construction. The galaxy had, for the first time in millennia, taken a collective breath. But Adrian was not at peace. His new existence as the warden was a constant, low-level hum in his mind. The lattice was a part of him, a sixth sense that connected him to the fundamental code of reality. And with that connection came dreams. He no longer dreamed of the war. He no longer dreamed of Clara's death. He dreamed of runes. They were not the dreams of a man, but the fragmented memory dumps of a cosmic hard drive. He saw images that made no sense. He saw dragons, clad in ancient, primitive armor, fighting other dragons under a sky black with smoke. He saw them building the first foundations of the lattice, their faces not proud, but terrified, as if they were building a shelter against a storm he could not see. And stranger still, he saw humans. They were not from Earth. Their architecture was alien, cities of impossible, spiraling towers that seemed to sing, They wore robes woven with circuits of light, and they were working with the ancient dragons, their hands glowing as they, too, manipulated the code of the lattice. This was a branch of humanity that Earth's history had never known. Then the dreams would turn dark. He saw these ancient humans and dragons not in cooperation, but in a panicked, desperate race. He saw a shared experiment, a vast machine designed to touch the void. He saw it fail. He saw the birth of the Null Maw, not as an invasion, in a flash of black, consuming despair. He would wake, his heart pounding, the opalescent runes on his arms glowing faintly in the dark of his room. The histories were wrong. The neat, tidy story of dragon arrogance and human victimhood was a lie. The whole narrative, the one that had fueled his entire life, was a simplification. He found Ceres in the sunken archive, the place where it had all begun. She was now the only one, besides him, permitted to enter. She was studying the prime runes, trying to build a true history of her people. "You're having them too, aren't you?" he said. No preamble. Ceres didn't look up from her console. The dreams, yes. Cities of glass. Dragons who were afraid. "I saw humans," Adrian said, his voice quiet. "Working with them. From before the war. From before Earth." Ceres finally turned, her golden eyes shadowed. "That is why I have been here. The official histories, the Sista, are sealed, layer upon layer. Even as regent, I am locked out of the deepest truths. My ancestors were terrified of something. They built this entire empire on a secret. Not from me," Adrian said. He stepped up to the massive crystalline wall, the heart of the lattice itself. He placed his hand on it. The runes on his arm blazed, and the wall responded, its light shifting from white gold to a deep, analytical blue. Node Admin Cole, requesting access. Security level prime. He felt the ancient data layers resist, the seals put in place by the first Empress. "Ceres," he said, his teeth gritted from the mental strain. "Your hand on mine. The lattice recognizes us as an equation. Me, the Warden. You, the blood. It can't deny us both." She placed her hand over his. The blue light flared, pulsed, and then the entire chamber chimed. A single, pure, resonant note. The seals broke. They were in. They were not dreams. It was a flood. The full, uncorrupted, primary memory of the lattice poured into their minds. Not as a metaphor, but as raw, recorded history. They saw the beginning, 1,000,000 years ago. Two species, born in the same galactic quadrant, both brilliant, both arrogant, and both cursed with the same, singular, terrifying flaw. They were afraid of death. The ancient dragons, masters of the physical, and the ancient humans, the Eld, as the lattice named them, masters of the psychic, formed an alliance. Their goal was not an empire. Their goal was immortality. They began to build the lattice, not as a prison, but as a machine. A machine to rewrite the fundamental law of entropy. A machine to conquer the very concept of an end. And they failed. They did not create an external monster. They created a bug. A psychic cancer. The Null Maw was not an it. It was an us. It was the concentrated, weaponized, sentient sum of their own collective terror. It was every dragon's fear of oblivion. Every Eld human's terror of being alone. Every dark, selfish, grasping desire for more life. All distilled into a single, conscious, psychic stain. It was a program error that had gained sentience. It was the shadow of their own shared ambition. They had tried to delete death, and had instead created a sentience that was death. "It's us," Ceres whispered, stumbling back, her hand flying to her mouth. "It was never another. It was our fault." The history unfolded, faster, more terrible. The two species, horrified by their creation, turned on each other. The dragons blamed the humans' psychic weakness for corrupting the code. The humans blamed the dragons' physical arrogance for pushing the experiment too far. The first war was not a war of conquest. It was a war of blame, a cycle of revenge, born from mutual, terrified guilt. The Eld humans were defeated, scattered, their great glass cities destroyed, their branch of humanity erased from the stars, forgotten. The dragons, the victors, sealed the maw in the prison of the lattice and then systematically erased the truth. They edited the lattice's own memory banks, sealing away the story of their partnership and their shared sin. They built a new history, a new religion, a new empire, all founded on a single, necessary lie that they were the saviors, the sole creators, the ones who had defeated an external, alien evil. They had been lying for 1,000,000 years. They needed a monster, Adrian said, the pieces of his entire life falling into a new, terrible pattern. They needed to be the good guys, so they buried the truth that the monster was them. He looked at Saris, whose face was a mask of shattered identity. Her entire culture, her pride, her lineage was all built on fraud. And then Adrian saw his own part, his hatred, his obsession, his single-minded quest for revenge against Malik, against the dragons, for Clara's death. I was feeding it, he breathed, a cold, dawning horror washing over him. That's why it was waking up. Malik's ambition, my revenge, Hale's greed, it's all the same. It's the same food, the same arrogant, selfish desire that created it in the first place. He had been repeating the cycle. He had been just another link in a 1,000,000-year-old chain of blame and hatred, stretching all the way back to that first, failed experiment. My joke, he said, the revelation hitting him. In the rune space, that's why it worked. It wasn't just a new variable. It was medicine. The maw fed on arrogant, self-serious emotions, hate, fear, greed. His humor, his ability to mock his own pain, was the antidote. It was the opposite. It was a form of humility. It was the first time in 1,000,000 years anyone had injected a solution into the bug, instead of just more of the problem. He hadn't just resealed the lock. He had, as he'd thought, begun to heal the disease. He had started to detoxify the poison. Saris sank to the crystal floor, her mind reeling. My entire life, my ancestors, everything we are is a lie to hide our shame. She was at a crossroads. As regent, her duty was clear stability, and this truth was a planet killer. If this got out, the hardline dragon lords would start a civil war. The newly freed vassal species would see the dragons not as flawed rulers, but as cosmic liars. The new, fragile conquered, would be shattered before it was even built. She had to make a choice: reseal the memory, continue the lie, or destroy her people's identity for the sake of the truth. You have to tell them, Adrian said, his voice soft but inflexible. Adrian, it will destroy us, she pleaded, looking up at him, her golden eyes filled with tears. It will be the end of our entire culture. It will start a war. It already did, he countered, kneeling beside her. Saris, my entire life was defined by a lie. My sister's death was twisted by Malik into a propaganda tool. My quest for revenge was based on a false history. I was a puppet. We've all been puppets, dancing on the strings of this ancient, buried guilt. He took her hands. This is my revenge. Saris. Not the one I wanted, but the one I need. The one Clara deserved. Her sacrifice wasn't just to save you. It was to end the cycle. You can't end a cycle by telling another lie. That's how this all started. He looked into her eyes. You're not your ancestors. You're not the empress of a lying empire. You're the regent of a new concord. And a concord has to be built on truth, or it's just another prison. She saw the iron in him. He was a victim of this lie, and he was demanding justice, not blood, just the truth. She nodded, a single, agonizing, cleansing act of surrender. It will cost us everything. It already has, he said. Now we just have to pay the bill. The event was called the Conclave of Truth. It was held 1 month later, in the Grand Throne Room. The room had been changed. The throne itself, the symbol of absolute power, had been removed. In its place was a simple, circular, crystal dais. Every delegate from the Interspecies Council was there. The dragon hardliners were there, their arms crossed, suspicious. The human delegation, now led by a sensible, boring woman who had been Adrian's deputy, was there. Ceres and Adrian walked to the center of the dais together. The great opalescent wall, with its mixed human and dragon script, glowed behind them. The series began. She did not speak as a ruler, but as a historian, as a scientist. For 1 million years, she said, her voice clear and carrying. The dragon shifters have told a story. We told of how we, alone, built the lattice. How we, alone, fought and imprisoned the great external evil, the Null Maw. How we, alone, brought order to the galaxy. She paused. Today, I am here to tell you that this story is a lie. A shocked, angry murmur swept through the hall. The hardline dragon lords surged to their feet, roaring in protest. This is heresy. The Regent is telling the truth. Adrian's voice cut through the noise. He touched the wall behind him, and the lattice responded. It projected a holographic image above them all, drawn from the memories they had unlocked. The hall went silent as they saw it. They saw the glass cities of the Eld humans. They saw the ancient, joint experiment. They saw the two species, dragon and human, working together. And then they saw the failure. They saw the Maw born, not from a distant star, but from the dark hearts of both species. There is no external evil, Adrian said, his voice echoing in the stunned silence. There is only us. The Maw is a monster of our own, shared creation. It is a bug in the code, born from our mutual fear of death, and fed by our mutual hatred, greed, and arrogance. He told them everything. He told them of the war of blame, the eradication of the Eld humans, the great cover-up. The Dragon Empire, Ceres concluded, her voice shaking but strong, was built to hide our shame, and in hiding it, we only fed the monster in the dark. Malik's coup was not an aberration. It was the inevitable result of 1,000,000 years of lies. The hall was tomb quiet. The Dragon Lords were ashen, their entire identity, their millennia of divine right, evaporated in an instant. The vassal species were staring, not in anger, but in a profound, stunned new understanding. My species, Adrian continued, is not innocent. The humans you know, from Earth, are a different branch, but we share the same flaw. My own quest for revenge was just another meal for the Maw. I was walking the same path as Malik. I was repeating the cycle. He looked out at the faces, dragon, human, and a dozen others. The war is over, not the one from 6 months ago, the one from 1,000,000 years ago. We are, all of us, the children of those who made the monster. And now, we have a choice. We can keep feeding it with our blame and our hatred, or we can starve it. Together. He had come to Aurea, seeking to burn the empire to the ground. And here he was, having done it. Not with bombs, but with a history lesson. He had taken his revenge. Not on their lives, but on their lies. It was a more complete, more devastating, and more healing victory than he could have ever imagined. The new Concord was born at that moment, not as a political alliance, but as a shared, painful, and necessary truth. The next day, Saris and Adrian stood before the Great Wall again. "What do we do with this?" she asked. "It's a monument to our shared history, but it's also a record of the battle, of Leo's scribbles." "We don't erase it," Adrian said. "Erasing history is how this whole mess started. We add to it." He had an idea. It was, like his last one, completely, stubbornly human. They brought in children, dozens of them, small, chattering, excited dragon children with their vestigial wings, and human children from the embassy, including Leo, who was ecstatic. They were all given nanostyluses, set to the same opalescent, permanent code as the lattice. "The wall is a scar," Adrian told the assembled, confused parents and delegates. "You don't heal a scar by hiding it. You accept it. You make it part of you." "Go ahead, kids," he yelled. "The biggest, prettiest wall in the galaxy. It's all yours. Draw." It was a glorious, beautiful chaos. Leo, no longer a savior, but just a kid, led the charge. He was proud, not because he was special, but because he was not. He was just one of the kids, the one who'd gotten to draw on it first. They drew over everything, over the ancient, terrible runes of the First War, over the scars of Milik's attack, over Leo's own, first, accidental scribbles. They drew pictures of their families, of their spaceships, of flowers, of dragons and humans holding hands. The scar was no longer a scar. It was a canvas. The living history of the galaxy was being rewritten, not by emperors or warriors, but by children, in a language of joy and shared creation. That night, Adrian and Sarah stood on the balcony, the same one where they had first, awkwardly, negotiated the terms of their courtship. Below them, in the Grand Hall, now renamed the Great Conclave, delegations were arguing, laughing, and sharing food. Children were still drawing on the lower levels of the wall, their creations glowing softly. It was loud. It was messy. It was imperfect. It was real. "It's a start," Sarah said, leaning her head on his shoulder. Adrian nodded, silent. He was listening. He was always listening now. The hum of the lattice was inside him. It was calm, stable. He felt the distant, cold spot that was the null maw. It was still there. It would always be there. It was, after all, a part of them. But it was no longer whispering of hate. It was no longer a void of despair. As he listened, truly listened, to the code, to the combined, messy, chaotic, beautiful energy of the conclave below, he heard something new from that cold, distant spot. It was faint. It was strange. But it was unmistakable. He heard the sound of laughter. He smiled, pulling Saris closer. He realized, in that final, quiet moment, that in giving up his old, dark revenge, he had finally, truly, starved the monster.